Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of deeper meaning, welcome. Today, I invite you into a space beyond appearances, beyond the fleeting impressions we often mistake for truth. In a world obsessed with performance and masks, we rarely pause long enough to ask, who is this person really? What lies beneath the surface? Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And that insight leads us to the heart of this lecture. For if you truly want to see the character of a person, not their reputation, not their charm, not their curated identity, but their true self, you must pay attention to just two things. Two windows into the soul, two signals that pierce the veil of the persona and reveal the architecture of the psyche. As we journey through the layers of human behavior and the unconscious mind today, you'll begin to notice what you may have previously overlooked. You'll learn how subtle actions speak louder than loud declarations. You'll learn how to observe and not to judge, but to understand, because understanding is the doorway to wisdom, and wisdom is what our world needs more than ever. A person's true character is revealed by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. This simple yet profound truth cuts through the illusion of appearances and performance. It speaks directly to the human tendency to engage in transactional behavior, weigh relationships according to perceived benefit, status, or personal gain. In a world governed by superficial metrics of success, where the value of a person is often measured by their utility or influence, we lose sight of one of the deepest indicators of authenticity: how one treats the seemingly insignificant. Carl Jung understood that the persona, the mask we wear in public, is often in service of gaining acceptance, admiration, and power. But character lives in the shadow. It emerges in the hidden places of our conduct, especially in the treatment of those who are powerless to advance our cause or elevate our image. In this way, human character is not tested in the spotlight, but in the unnoticed moments, in the quiet corners where there's no applause, no recognition, no reward. Observe a person's interaction with a waiter, a janitor, a child, a stray animal, or someone society has overlooked or discarded. These interactions are revealing. Do they express kindness, patience, and presence, or do they reveal irritation, superiority, and neglect? The ego may remain cloaked during grand displays of generosity or eloquent speeches about justice, but it can't hide during brief encounters with those who are perceived as having no leverage. These are the moments when the mask slips, even for a second, and what is revealed is the essence of that individual's soul architecture. This is not merely a philosophical or ethical proposition, it is deeply psychological. The inability to respect or empathize with those deemed lower or less useful speaks to an inner poverty. It suggests an undeveloped sense of self, one that still relies on hierarchy to feel significant. For the secure self, compassion is not rationed. It flows naturally, not because the recipient has earned it, but because the giver has cultivated a wholeness that no longer depends on status games to assert value. This is why Jung emphasized individuation, the process of becoming wholer, the path to true character. To examine this further, we must understand projection. Often, disdain for the powerless is a projection of one's own repressed weakness. The elderly, the disabled, the homeless, they remind us, unconsciously, of our own vulnerability. The discomfort that arises from these encounters is not about them, but about what they awaken within us. Rather than process that vulnerability, many reject it outwardly. They dehumanize the other to avoid confronting the fragile dimensions of their own psyche. In doing so, they reveal an unintegrated shadow, a fragmented self, a character still under the dominion of fear. Character is forged not only by choice, but by awareness. When a person becomes conscious of their inner reactions to the powerless, they're at a crossroads. Do they choose to remain unconscious, repeating the same patterns of condescension or neglect, or do they use the discomfort as a mirror? That mirror can be a painful teacher, but it offers the gift of transformation. The moment one recognizes that they recoil from the weak because they have not made peace with their own weakness is the moment growth begins. Even in positions of authority, true character resists the seduction of superiority. It is easy to act humble when speaking to someone we admire or fear. It is easy to show patience to someone who holds social capital. But true character is tested in asymmetrical relationships. When one party holds all the power and the other holds none, what happens then? Does the powerful extend dignity, or exploit the imbalance? Does the powerful listen, or dominate? Does the powerful acknowledge the other's humanity, or treat them as invisible? These questions are not hypothetical, they are diagnostic. They help us read the truth written between a person's words. Behind their polished exterior, we see this dynamic at play in daily life. In offices, A manager who scolds an intern but flatters the CEO has a divided self. In families, a parent who demands respect from their children but belittles the elderly reveals more about their own unhealed inner child than about the object of their scorn. In politics, a leader who champions justice on stage but exploits staff behind the scenes is ruled not by vision but by vanity. In all these examples, the core remains the same. They treat people according to usefulness, not according to worth. This is not character, it is performance. True character does not require an audience. It is consistent in public and private. It is not activated by what can be gained, but by what is right. This kind of character is rare because it demands internal integrity. It is not concerned with image but with essence. It is shaped not by external reward, but by internal coherence. When someone treats the powerless with the same respect and attentiveness they show to the powerful, they are revealing the alignment between their values and their behavior. They are no longer reacting to people based on what they can extract, but relating to them based on shared humanity. This level of integrity cannot be faked. It is the fruit of deep inner work, and this is why many avoid it. It's easier to be charming than to be kind. It's easier to perform empathy than to embody it. But the soul knows the difference, and over time, so do the people around you, because character, unlike charisma, leaves a trace. The person who lifts others regardless of their utility becomes a presence that heals, that empowers, that liberates, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because that is simply who they have become. One way to understand this transformation is through the Jungian concept of the self, the archetype of wholeness. The more we integrate the different aspects of ourselves, our shadow, our anima or animus, our wounded child, the more we relate to others from wholeness rather than from neediness or insecurity. We no longer need someone to affirm our importance, for us to treat them with dignity. We no longer need someone to validate our worth for us to see theirs. Instead of using people, we begin to serve them. Instead of seeking dominance, we cultivate presence. This is what separates true character from social strategy. In practical terms, look for the small things. How someone handles interruptions, how they respond when they are wrong, how they treat someone who made a mistake, how they speak about others when those people are not around. These are the signals of character, not their eloquence, not their brand, not their network. Pay attention to how they talk to the cashier, the janitor, the person bringing water to their table. That is where the real person is revealed. Even spiritually, the pattern holds. In nearly every religious and mystical tradition, the divine is described as being especially close to the poor, the weak, the forgotten. This is not accidental. The powerless strip away our illusions. They invite us to see clearly. They challenge our assumptions about control, worth, and meaning. And they offer us a gift, the opportunity to choose compassion without condition, generosity without gain, love without leverage. To reject that opportunity is not only to reject them, but to reject a part of ourselves. The modern world conditions us to value people based on their productivity, their aesthetics, their influence. Social media has amplified this distortion, creating an economy of attention where worth is measured by visibility. But true character cannot be posted, it cannot be hashtagged, it is not found in likes or followers. It is revealed in what you do when no one is watching, in how you treat someone who can do nothing for you. The moment you pause and speak to the person everyone else is ignoring, that is a holy moment. That is when you are more than a brand. That is when you are human. That there is also a developmental dimension here. Children often learn to treat others based on how they see adults model behavior. If a child observes their parent being rude to a server but respectful to a boss, they absorb the lesson. Respect is conditional, based on status. But when a child sees their parent treat all people with dignity, regardless of position, they receive an unspoken education in character. This is how generational patterns are shaped, not by lectures, but by example. Therefore, our treatment of the powerless doesn't just define us, it shapes the future. The challenge is subtle because ego loves hierarchy. It wants to feel important by comparison. It seeks identity through superiority. But when we live from ego, we are never free. We are always managing impressions, always needing. Observe how someone responds to adversity, not what they say, but what they instinctively do when control is lost. There is no greater revelation of character than what emerges in the midst of pressure, chaos, and uncertainty. We spend much of our lives constructing images, rehearsing reactions, cultivating a presentation that fits social norms and expectations. But when adversity strikes, it strips away the layers. It bypasses the curated self and exposes what lies at the core of a person's being. It unmasks the ego and reveals the substance or absence of inner life. Carl Jung understood that our psychological structures are often held together by the illusion of control. The ego believes it governs all outcomes, and when things fall apart, the ego panics. This panic isn't always loud. Sometimes it's expressed through silence, withdrawal, cruelty, or denial. But however it surfaces, adversity introduces us to the shadow, the part of the psyche we most often avoid. And in this moment of confrontation, the truth of one's character begins to shine through, whether radiant or raw. In a crisis, people can no longer pretend. Their instincts take over. An instinct is shaped by what has been nurtured in silence through values, reflection, inner work, and most of all, honesty. Adversity doesn't create character, it reveals it. It shows whether the kindness once shown was conditional. It tests whether the patience was genuine or performative. It challenges whether the love professed was deep or merely decorative. When things go wrong, the stage disappears, and all that's left is the soul. Jung's idea of individuation, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious mind, becomes essential in this context. A person who has faced their inner chaos is not overwhelmed by external chaos. Their reaction in adversity may still carry emotion, but it does not fracture their being. They are not undone by the storm because they have navigated storms within. They do not displace blame because they have accepted responsibility for their shadow. They do not lash out because they have learned to dialogue with their fear. This is not perfection, it is integrity, and integrity becomes visible precisely when things are falling apart. This is why it's crucial not to confuse someone's public behavior with their private truth. Adversity functions as a mirror that doesn't lie. It reflects the emotional maturity, the level of inner coherence, and the degree to which a person has reconciled with their limitations. When someone loses a job, faces illness, endures betrayal, or experiences failure, watch closely. Does their reaction reduce others, or do they remain kind? Do they seek scapegoats, or do they reflect inward? Do they become bitter, or do they deepen in wisdom? These are not random fluctuations of mood, they are signals of character. People often say the right things when circumstances are ideal. They preach about loyalty, compassion, patience, and love, but these values are easy when nothing is at stake. The true test is how these virtues hold under fire. It is in disappointment that the ego is tempted to retaliate. It is in loss that fear begins to dominate. And it is in humiliation that pride shows its claws. Yet, it is also in these moments that the soul has the greatest opportunity to evolve. Adversity is both a revelation and an invitation. It reveals what is and invites what could be. Those who crumble into cruelty in hard times have not cultivated internal resources. Their outer strength was propped up by comfort, by affirmation, by structure. Remove these props, and they collapse into complaint, manipulation, or violence. But those who stand with grace amidst difficulty draw from a different source. They have known suffering and allowed it to transform them. They have not hidden from pain but allowed it to chisel away the false self. And so, when adversity comes, they do not act from panic but from presence. Their actions are not reactions, they are responses measured, intentional, and honest. This capacity is not about emotional suppression, it is not about appearing calm, it is about root. A rooted person may cry, tremble, or grieve deeply in adversity, but they do not become someone else. They remain faithful to their values. They do not compromise their integrity. They do not project their suffering outward through blame or abuse. Instead, they become more human, more tender, more awake. Their character doesn't dissolve, it distills. What was always inside them becomes visible. We must also acknowledge that adversity often brings out the unconscious material that we have refused to face. For someone who has repressed anger, hardship may erupt in uncontrolled rage. For one who masks insecurity, failure may trigger arrogance as a defense. For those who need to control outcomes to feel safe, the unpredictability of life becomes a breeding ground for aggression or despair. These responses are not moral failings, they are psychological wounds, but if left unchecked, they calcify into patterns. And patterns, over time, define personality. This is why awareness is essential. It's not about having perfect responses, but about recognizing when adversity is activating the shadow. The person who can pause and say, "This suffering is awakening a part of me I need to understand," is already on the path to transformation. Jung would call this the beginning of integration, the process of turning unconscious reaction into conscious choice. Through this, the soul is tempered. It learns resilience not through denial but through truth. we must also be careful of false strength. There are those who, in adversity, seem calm and collected. They give off an aura of composure, but beneath the surface, their calm is a mask, not a manifestation of character. They have not embraced their pain, they have bypassed it. They are disconnected from feeling, not rooted in wisdom. This disconnection is often praised by society as stoicism or strength, but it is brittle. Eventually it breaks. Because unacknowledged, pain becomes poison. It leaks through sarcasm, control, or emotional withdrawal. True strength is vulnerable. It feels deeply without being undone. In relationships, the revelation of character during adversity is particularly sharp. When tensions rise between partners, or in families, how each person shows up becomes a mirror of their emotional development. Does one partner shut down while the other explodes? Does conflict lead to curiosity or to condemnation? Is there room for mutual repair, or is there an impulse to win and dominate? These dynamics are not merely interpersonal, they reflect the relationship each person has with their own pain. A person who cannot sit with their own discomfort will not tolerate yours. A person who blames themselves mercilessly may also blame you to relieve the pressure. Adversity magnifies these tendencies and makes them impossible to ignore. At the societal level, we witness this same phenomenon. In times of collective crisis, war, pandemics, economic collapse, the character of leaders is exposed. Some inspire hope and collaboration. Others descend into fear-mongering, authoritarianism, or scapegoating. The same is true of communities. When fear spreads, people either come together in solidarity or retreat into survivalism. The way groups behave under pressure reveals the maturity of their values. Crisis does not create division, it exposes what was already there. And so, when we look to understand someone's true self, we must look not at their moments of success, but at their valleys. How they navigate uncertainty, loss, and betrayal says more than their philosophies or accomplishments. A person who maintains dignity when they are losing, who shows empathy when they are suffering, who resists the urge to harm when they are hurting, that person has cultivated inner freedom. They are not slaves to their emotions. They are not held hostage by the need for control. They have made peace with the fundamental truth of life, that we are not in charge of everything, and that suffering, when embraced consciously, becomes sacred. It is important to reflect on how we respond to adversity ourselves. Are we reactive or reflective? Do we grow more compassionate or more closed? Do we allow the hardship to break us open or shut us down? These questions are not meant to produce shame but to illuminate the path of growth. Because every hardship is both a mirror and a teacher. It shows us what still needs healing and offers us the terrain in which to practice becoming whole. The world will not spare us from adversity. Relationships will be tested. Dreams will be delayed. Plans will be undone. Injustice will occur. And in each of these moments, our character is being sculpted, not in the grand, visible sense, but in the quiet decisions of how we speak, act, and hold space for others and ourselves. These decisions accumulate. They become the threads of our legacy. And legacy is not defined by what we achieve, but by who we become when the lights are off and the path is unclear. In a culture that glorifies success and punishes failure, the temptation to perform strength is strong. We are taught to keep it together, to move on quickly, to find silver linings. But Jung reminds us that the goal is not to ascend beyond suffering but to descend into it consciously, to sit in the ashes without needing immediate answers, to allow the pain to work on us, to teach us, to humble us. This descent is not weakness, it is the beginning of wisdom, because only what has been faced can be transformed, and only what has been transformed can become a foundation. So, when you observe someone in crisis, pay attention, not to their words, but to their posture, their tone, their treatment of others. Do they grow more generous or more guarded? Do they continue to honor commitments, or do they abandon responsibility? Do they use the crisis as a justification for mistreatment, or as an opportunity for introspection? These are the indicators of depth. They tell you whether someone has built their identity on the surface or whether they have rooted themselves in something deeper. Even in leadership, whether spiritual, corporate, or political, adversity reveals what titles cannot. A true leader remains a servant in suffering. They do not abandon the vulnerable to protect their image. They do not use fear to manipulate outcomes. They hold steady not because they are immune to pain, but because they have faced their own and are not afraid of yours. They hold space. They model courage, not bravado. They ask questions, not just issue commands. And they remember that the way they lead in loss will echo longer than any success they achieve. The journey toward this kind of character is slow and often hidden. It is not glamorous. It is forged in long nights, honest reflections, painful conversations, and difficult choices. It requires humility, the willingness to admit that we do not know everything, that we have much to learn, and that pain is not an interruption of our growth, but the soil of it. And in this humility, the ego loosens its grip. The false self begins to fade, and what remains is something truer, something timeless. Those who emerge from adversity with grace are not superhuman. They have simply practiced honesty. They have stopped pretending to be above suffering and have begun to walk with it. They have chosen to let pain soften rather than harden them. And because of this, they become safe people. You feel it in their presence. You sense that they won't abandon you in your struggle because they have not abandoned themselves in theirs. They are not perfect, but they are present. And presence is what gives character its true weight. When you know this truth, you begin to see adversity differently. You stop fearing it as a threat and start meeting it as an initiator. You realize that the fire does not burn away what is essential, it only removes what is false. And so you begin to live differently. You speak with more care. You listen with more intention. You show up not just for moments of joy, but for moments of mess. And through this showing up, your character becomes evident, not in grand declarations, but in quiet acts of faithfulness. This is what it means to live authentically. Not to be free from adversity, but to be faithful in it. Not to avoid pain, but to transmute it. Not to posture strength, but to embody it in the form of tenderness, honesty, and grounded presence. Because ultimately, who we are in adversity is who we truly are. And the more we face this truth, the more we are transformed into someone else, but into who we were always meant to be.